Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk about Catholic Charities. And joining me in today's show is Rachel Hrbolich and Father Jack Lavelle. I'm glad that you could be on the show today.
Thank you
We're
for
glad to
having
be
us.
here.
Maybe to give the folks that are with us a little flavor for Catholic Charities, we might want to begin by just telling the folks what exactly is Catholic Charities.
Catholic Charities is the administrative arm for the bishop for carrying out the social concerns activities for the diocese. In the Chancery offices, Catholic Charities consists of the Office of Social Services and the Office of Social Action. In the communities of the diocese, we also operate social service agencies or oversee social service agencies. So in each of the counties, we do have a presence of Catholic Charities to serve people in need.
We're going to talk a little bit more about those particular two branches, but I think I'd like to ask Father Lavelle to give us a little history of the beginnings of Catholic Charities, especially here in the United States.
Well, certainly we see that sense of charity is in existence even before the time of Jesus, but it's certainly something he himself speaks about and has always been part of the church. The movement in Europe is Charitas, which is the counterpart to Catholic Charities USA. Catholic Charities USA would have been formed a little over 100 years ago in 1910. As a matter of fact, there was a large gathering of its establishment in Washington, D.C., and since then has operated as the overarching umbrella of charitable work in the church throughout the 50 states. Every diocese then would have been challenged to develop their own Catholic Charities agency, and that takes on different shapes and different forms in every diocese across the country, responding first and foremost to what are the needs of the people in that particular diocese. So no one program really fits every diocese. There are certainly ministries that are common, but we see, as Rachel mentioned, how we attempt to meet those needs in our own diocese is different than how it might be in neighboring dioceses or dioceses across the country.
Rachel, if we can go back to the difference between social action and social services, what makes up the two?
Social services is actually the direct services to people in need, which is why we feel that we need to have a presence in each of the counties we serve. Our core program is emergency assistance, and this would be basically carrying out the corporal works of mercy, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, sheltering the homeless. Those basic core services really comprise the bulk of what we do at Catholic Charities, and that would be the social service branch of Charities. Social action would be more of the advocacy, the legislative work that we do to enact changes on behalf of those people who are living in poverty and the people in need that we serve.
How important is it to have that advocacy for the people who cannot speak for themselves? How important is that in your agency to do that?
It's extremely important. Catholic Charities has always called itself the attorney for the poor, and through social action and through advocacy, that is how we are able to be the voice for those who have no voice, and to work with our elected officials and other government leaders to help enact changes that affect those most vulnerable and those who are living in poverty that we see in Catholic Charities on a daily basis.
I would imagine when we talk about social services in and around our diocese, and you talk about different programs in dioceses around the country that are not always the same, is that true in our own diocese? Are like different programs different in each county?
Absolutely. In our structure, while we meet needs and have a presence in each of the 6 counties, they're currently configured into 3 Catholic Charities agencies. One serves what we call the regional area, which is Columbiana, Mahoning, and Trumbull. One serves Portage and Stark, and then the other serves Ashtabula. And while they have some of those common ministries, as Rachel said, those basic needs of feeding and providing shelter and assistance with utilities. Then each of them branches into some very specific programs based on what has emerged as a need. So there's a different ministry going on up in Ashtabula than maybe is going on in Columbiana. One of the ministries that we have in Columbiana is, again, a shelter for those who are seeking comfort and refuge from abuse situations. Then you move over into Stark County and we have an adult daycare service, recognizing the need for older citizens to be cared for. So we have those common services, but then throughout the 6 counties, we've really tried to respond to what maybe is not being met by other social service agencies.
We've got about a few minutes left before the end of our first segment. Before the taping, we talked about certain trends that are taking place, and I would imagine that those change in time. What are certain trends that you see happening and more prevalent in our world today?
Well, the need for housing services and utility assistance have remained fairly consistent over the past several years. What we have seen in recent times is an increase in the need for food assistance. As one of our directors put it, what used to be an emergency food pantry at our agency has become a primary source of food for a lot of families. So some of our agencies are transitioning from that emergency role to being a major community provider of food. So that has been a real need that has emerged within the last couple of years, in addition to the basic things that we've always been known for doing.
I'm wondering if that trend is typical around the country, where we have this group of people, probably a large group of people, that need food. Is that typical around the country?
It is typical. Cuts to SNAP, which is also known as food stamps, impacted a lot of families last year. So food dollars that could typically be stretched for an entire month were no longer able to be stretched. So we started seeing people come to Catholic Charities for help with food much earlier than we had in previous years. So right away when those cuts hit to SNAP, we started to see people needing help immediately.
Let's talk about poverty first of all. Poverty obviously is something that's been with us from the beginning of time. So what does the church say about the poor, especially what is the Pope saying about the poor?
Well, certainly Pope Francis has not discovered the poor, but he has raised them up as an example of how we're all called to serve. But he has really highlighted the fact that there are many among us who are poor. And as you said, they've always been with us. But I think the church has always sought to reach out, and we can go back even beyond Francis. If we go back to the beginning of what becomes the compendium of Catholic social teaching, there was this recognition by Leo XIII of the working poor, people who were working very hard but could not provide for their families. And so the church, in that first encyclical and then in all subsequent documents, has really called for not just handout to the poor, but as Rachel said then with that advocacy part, to try to lift the poor out of poverty, to allow them the dignity and the respect. But again, we have to have the twofold. The advocacy is great, and it is what will change some aspects, but in the meantime, you also have to meet the immediate needs.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but before we do, we're going to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Johnsons enjoy Friday dinners out. Nothing fancy, just time together to reconnect as family. They make sure others eat as well. By giving to Catholic Charities of Youngstown, the Johnsons join other angels who care for those in need, regardless of religion or race. Show your wings with a gift to Catholic Charities, changing lives one family at a time, providing housing, emergency financial assistance, senior services, and more. Give now at ccdoy.org.
Light Moments. Here's Father Tom McSweeney.
Baseball is one of America's favorite pastimes. Spending a day at the ballpark, eating hot dogs, and singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" during the 7th inning stretch never goes out of style. But did you ever wonder how the 7th inning stretch got started? Back in the 1880s, Brother Jasper Brennan was the baseball coach at Manhattan College. He was also the Dean of Discipline. When students attended baseball games, they were careful to sit quietly so that Brother Jasper wouldn't take them to task. During one game, Brother Jasper noticed that his students were especially fidgety, so he told them to stand up and move around. The popularity of the 7th inning stretch spread and soon became a national standard. Maybe an idea of yours will do the same someday. Remember, in order to hit a home run, you have to keep on slugging.
This message from the Christophers, New York, 10017.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Father Jack Lavelle and Rachel Hrbolich about Catholic Charities. We kind of ended our first segment talking about poverty and some of those trends that you've seen progress in this day and age. Are those trends typical around the country as well when we're talking about unemployment and services being cut and so forth?
They are pretty typical. One thing that we have also seen within the last couple of years is a rise in the number of working poor families needing our assistance. I think a lot of times when people think of the poor, they have a stereotype in their minds. But a lot of the people that we're seeing these days are people with jobs that are working, full-time jobs at a minimum wage and just can no longer afford the expenses of living. So we're seeing a lot of working poor families, probably more than we ever have, in addition to the poor who will always be with us and who will always need Catholic Charities. So that definitely has been a trend that we have seen.
It's interesting. I was talking with someone the other day about saying we didn't have these problems years ago. Well, there were a lot of things we didn't have years ago that we have now. And so as things change in our society, those things also change in how we do things in our society, including how we minister to those who are in need. We had mentioned something about advocacy earlier on. What is so difficult about advocacy, especially trying to change the mind of people who could help change those laws and regulations? What is a barrier, so to speak, if that's accurate?
Well, I think, as you point out, people say, well, we didn't used to have these problems. And one of the things I've encountered is we've always had these problems. We've always had the difficulty of people trapped in cycles of poverty. One of the things that perhaps has changed in the last few decades is the mobilization of people. It was not uncommon for every family to have people in their family who fell on hard times. But we did have a different concept of the extended family. If you think of some of the immigrant families who would have 3 generations living in a home, or an aunt or an uncle who had a bedroom in the home. So there was this greater sense of family. And so if someone fell on hard times, there were other people there to pick up the slack. As we saw, quite frankly, some of the breakdown of the human family or the mobilization, people moving away, people go to college, as Rachel said, some of the working poor who have college degrees, they go away, they get a degree, they get a job, they don't move back home, they're in another state, they're in another part of the country, and then their business shuts down, or there's huge layoffs, and they don't have that system in place. And so they find themselves alone and in need. So I don't think it's fair to say we haven't always had these problems. We've had them. We did take care of them in a different way. And so where Catholic Charities and where the emergence of many of these organizations and charitable activities that we didn't used to know, they've become essential because of the change in the dynamic of society.
Well, I would think the other thing that occurs is that you can't do it all alone. You have to have other groups and organizations that participate in meeting these particular needs, because one organization can't meet every need. So how does Catholic Charities work with other groups and organizations out in the world?
Well, one of the services that we try to embed in everything that we do is case management. So this means meeting with a client, getting a real sense of what their total needs are, and then linking them with community resources that can address some of their other needs that Catholic Charities cannot. It makes better use of resources all around in the community to do it that way. And we certainly cannot do everything and be everything to everyone. So by sitting with a client, by getting a sense of what their needs are, we are able then to give them information, make phone calls on their behalf to other agencies, and link them with the things that they really need to be financially stable and to hopefully begin the process of getting out of poverty.
Which kind of brings me to another question. Are there particular needs that Catholic Charities does not meet or cannot meet?
One thing that we do not do, we don't do counseling, mental health counseling or drug and alcohol services. A lot of times people don't know that about us. We are certainly happy to make counseling referrals. We have a list of counselors that we feel very comfortable referring clients to who need those services, but we just do not have the capacity nor the expertise to do everything. And counseling and drug and alcohol services are certainly a discipline of their own that is separate from what we do.
Which I think makes sense. You know, if there's some particular service that you can't provide, obviously referring is the professional thing to do, and I know, as you mentioned, you do that. Let's go back to the basic mission of Catholic Charities. What's the fundamental mission of Catholic Charities?
Well, I certainly think that the fundamental mission is found in the scriptures with the corporal works of mercy. I do think that, as Rachel said, even with the trends and the rise, I think many people do find us synonymous with those very basic necessities of life that they are in need of. And so they do come to us for food. They come to us for shelter. They come to us for utilities. In some places, they come to us for prescription assistance. A huge uprise of elderly living in poverty. That American dream of working hard and your pension and your Social Security is going to take care of you throughout your life has really not become the dream for many. We had seen a few years ago, a study showed that the Mahoning Valley had one of the highest rates of food insecurity among seniors. People who you think would have prepared, and maybe they did prepare, but maybe where they worked didn't prepare well. And so we find a lot of elderly in need of food, in need of prescription assistance. So while we do some of those other ministries, I do think our basic core need is to meet the person where they are, to help them, but then to advocate for a change in society down the road.
And ultimately, we do this in faith. That's why we do what we do in Catholic Charities. We've got about 2 minutes left in our second segment. In our third segment, we're going to talk basically about some of the specific programs that Catholic Charities provide in the different social service agencies. But before we do that, let's try to close with some of those important reliefs, and that's like disaster relief. We know that Catholic Charities is behind whenever something drastic happens around the country, they respond immediately. What are some of those disaster reliefs that Catholic Charities immediately responds to?
Well, our Office of Social Action is also the local branch for Catholic Relief Services, which is the international branch of disaster relief for the Catholic Church. So when a disaster does strike internationally, we are usually the collection point for monetary gifts from the Diocese of Youngstown, and we forward that money then on to Catholic Relief Services, where it gets to the people who need it most and the professionals to provide the services there. For national disasters that happen within our borders, Catholic Charities USA is the point. So we coordinate all of those disaster collections too and forward that money on to Charities USA. So we're the local contact for any kind of disaster relief.
Isn't it true that Catholic Charities is oftentimes the first one to respond when there's a natural disaster, not just to Catholics, but to everyone in general?
Catholics and non-Catholics alike trust the Catholic Church when it comes to issues like disasters. And it's amazing the generosity of the people in our diocese who have responded phenomenally when there's been a disaster. We've forwarded hundreds of thousands of dollars overseas to Catholic Relief Services and to Charities USA for various disasters that have hit over the years.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that funding in our final segment, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Johnsons enjoy Friday dinners out. Nothing fancy, just time together to reconnect as family. They make sure others eat as well. By giving to Catholic Charities of Youngstown, the Johnsons join other angels who care for those in need, regardless of religion or race. Show your wings with a gift to Catholic Charities, changing lives one family at a time, providing housing, emergency financial assistance, senior services, and more. Give now at ccdoy.org.
Welcome back to Spotlight. We're talking about Catholic Charities with Rachel and Father Jack. We kind of ended our second segment talking about some of those disasters that Catholic Charities is so wonderful in responding to. Let's talk specifically about what's going on locally here in our diocese. there's a wealth of programs and services that Charities provides. Let's begin with kind of the umbrella, which is the Bishop's Appeal, which helps to fund those. So let's talk about that briefly.
Well, the structure of the Bishop's Appeal, and every diocese has some type of appeal. But we're very, very blessed in the Diocese of Youngstown that our Bishop's Appeal annually provides 66% of all of the dollars raised to be used for the work of Catholic Charities. As we travel around the country and talk with other Catholic Charities agencies, that is a phenomenal percentage of money that goes directly to assist us with our services. And as Rachel said in our previous segment, the generosity of Catholics and non-Catholics alike is outstanding, but specifically within the Bishop's Appeal, the response of people in our pews across our 6 counties is just phenomenal. What Catholic Charities is then able to do with that 66% that we receive from the Bishop's Appeal is to leverage those dollars. And so for every $1 that comes from the Bishop's Appeal, nearly $2 more is given to Catholic Charities through grants, through contracts, through other opportunities of giving. So we use that money to leverage more money to create a much larger pool to meet the needs that we have.
And let's talk about some of those specific programs that are funded with this 66%. Let's start with Stark County and Portage, if we could. And what are some particular programs there, or maybe programs that are unique to that part of the diocese? Anything in particular?
Unique to Portage and Stark counties are the Adult Day Services program, as Father Lavelle has mentioned. That operates out of Louisville in Stark County. It provides respite care for people who are caring for loved ones with memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, a very necessary and needed service in that community. Also in Ravenna, out of our Ravenna office, we have something called Charities Cafe, and it's a socialization center for at-risk adults, people who come in off the street, they have a pastry, they have a cup of coffee, they socialize with other people, and get links with our services. Some of them could benefit from many of the things that Catholic Charities do. So that's a good point to get them together and to link them with some of the things that we do and some of the things that are available in the community to meet their needs.
Let's go up to Ashtabula County now. Is any in particular program that stands out that's peculiar to that area in the diocese?
Our Catholic Charities Agency in Ashtabula County has a very active volunteer guardianship program to help some of our vulnerable seniors up there who have no one else to represent them if they need that representation. We also have a volunteer or a representative payee services. We have a lot of mentally challenged adults up there who need someone to help them pay their bills and manage their living expenses. So we have quite a client load there with the payee program, and those are 2 services that are unique to Ashtabula County.
Let's go south to Columbiana County.
As Father Lavelle mentioned, we have a domestic violence shelter in Columbiana County. It's the only such shelter in the county. In Trumbull County, also, we offer a variety of services, including our emergency assistance, our First Step program, which is specific assistance for low-income pregnant women and families with children, housing services. When we were talking about trends, I just mentioned briefly housing. That is a real need that has emerged in recent times as well, and we do offer those in all of the counties. In Mahoning County and Trumbull County, we have a very good homeless outreach program where our caseworkers leave the offices, they're out on the streets, finding homeless people where they are, making sure that their needs are met, making sure in the wintertime that they're warm, that they have someplace safe to go to escape the elements, especially given the brutal winter that we had this past year.
What I'd like us to talk about now are the people that make up the Catholic Charities services, those who actually work in the field offices. What kind of people are they? Who are they? Not necessarily names, but what's their backgrounds and what do they provide to the people on a daily basis?
Well, I think first and foremost, it could be said of all of our employees across the 6 counties that there is a desire to help people. One of the things that we're very blessed with is a staff of people who have at their heart's desire the need and the real desire to help people. I don't think that's something you can necessarily teach an employee. I don't think we can have a training session for caring. So they do come to us first and foremost understanding what Catholic Charities does, not specific programs, but the overarching view of our work. And so that is a common bond they all have. But within all of the different agencies and offices, we have people who have backgrounds in social services. We have people who have backgrounds in business. We have people who perhaps this is their first job and they're a receptionist or helping in one of the different programs, whether it be the adult day services or the domestic violence shelter. And we do provide ongoing training for them to develop the skills they need in their particular job. But it is a given that they come with that heart of generosity. And some of our employees over the course of the years have been former recipients of the generosity of Catholic Charities themselves and see it truly as a mission and a ministry, paying back, if you will, what they themselves have received.
Isn't that often what happens? You know, we receive blessings and gifts, and in turn that's to enable us and encourage us to give back, and that's ultimately what stewardship is all about. Let's say that the folks that are with us might want to give to Catholic Charities or find out more information about the services that are provided. Any phone numbers, any website that they could contact?
Certainly. Our website, I think the two staff people that we have in our office work maintaining our website do a fantastic job. So it's always changing, it's always current, and that web address is ccdoy.org. That is Catholic Charities website. From that site, you can link to all of our agencies located in the 6 counties and see the specific services offered in each individual county. They are always free also to call Catholic Charities at the diocese, and the number there is 330-744-8451.
Let's say that there are folks that are listening that are embarrassed to call for help. I'm sure that you've run across those people. I know I have. What would you encourage them to do if they have a particular need right now?
Well, sometimes I often tell people in the parish when we talk about the bishop's appeal or some of the other appeals that are happening is that it's not necessarily us giving. We're not doing this action, but that these opportunities are providing us the opportunity to fulfill our mission. And so in that same vein, I would like to encourage people to realize that God has blessed each of us differently, and that sometimes we are in greater need of one blessing than of another. And so that they're coming to us, they should not be embarrassed or ashamed that we are here. Our mission and ministry is to help them in whatever lack of blessing they're currently receiving, and also to help us fulfill our own mission, to help me as a pastor help the people of my parish fulfill their Christian responsibility, to not be embarrassed or ashamed, but see that we're all working together as brothers and sisters of the Lord, trying to make up for what each other is lacking.
Well, Father Jack Lavelle, Rachel Hrbolich, thank you so much for being with us today and enlightening us about the wonderful work of Catholic Charities. And we want to thank the folks that are with us who give annually to the Bishop's Appeal for that. Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.